Good morning, everybody. Hello. Welcome to our morning meeting with our ambassadors. This morning we have Fern. We're going to be discussing bats, but we have Fern here. Our bats are, we try to keep them separate from people just to make sure that they stay safe and the virus. So they are coming at the moment, but we did want to discuss bats. Good morning, Dad. Good morning, Katie. Hello. We did want to discuss bats because they're amazing, and we're very concerned with their conservation here at the center. So we did want to make sure that we got a chance to talk about them with you guys during the summer. And as it turns out, barred owls are a major predator of bats in the wild, so this is fitting. But we are here with Fern. You guys are all familiar with Fern if you've seen us before. And Fern is our barred owl ambassador. She is very sweet. She's been with us for about a year and a half now, and she lives with our male barred owl named Byron. The two of them are very, very sweet together. They actually were fostering baby owls this summer, so we're really lucky to have both of them living with us. Good morning, Sierra. How are you? Good morning, Sarah. Hello. So Fern is going to help us talk about bats today, and we at the center take very few rabies vector species or species that can spread rabies, but we do take bats. And the reason that we take bats is, number one, they're very tiny in our area. All of the bats that we have are fairly small. Thank you so much, Allison, for donating. That's so sweet. Good morning, Carolyn. Hello. Thank you. Thank you. All of the bats that we have in our area are pretty small and therefore can be easily contained, so we don't have to worry about them, getting loose and running amok. They also are easy to keep staff only. We have about 100 volunteers every year and somewhere around 20 to 30 interns depending on the year, so it is really important for us to have animals that can be taken care of both by volunteers and interns as well as our staff, and our staff are able to take care of the bats that we get every year. That we get a handful, so they are usually able to handle them. And the bats that we do get are our local species of bats. We are lucky enough in Maine to have 9 different species of bats that live here either all year or part of the year. And like I mentioned, barred owls are a big predator of bats. So we have Fern here for a thematically appropriate reason. But our bats are wonderful, and especially this time of year you might really see them and appreciate them more because they are out and about. You might see them doing what we call the Bat Olympics, where they fly around in the sky looking for insects in the summer skies at night, and they are very, very good at hunting and catching insects. So especially on those summer nights when you're complaining about how buggy it is and how many mosquito bites you've gotten, our bats are really, really helpful to make sure that our insect populations are kept in check. Good morning, Molly, Ryan. Good morning, John. Hello, Xander in Plymouth, and Rebecca. Hello. So we are very much interested in helping you guys to protect bats here at the Center for Wildlife. It's one of our favorite things to do is to build bat houses with the public. So we have a bat house kind of pre-set to go here, and Fern and I are going to show you guys how it gets set up. We also have a link in the description to a wonderful resource from Bat Conservation International. That website is really fantastic. It's where we get a lot of our recommendations on sizing and structures of bat houses that we build, and also any recommendations on how to set them up, how to place them, all of those things. So if you have any questions about the bat house that we're building today, please visit that site because it's very, very informative for you guys. Good morning, Zekeske. I'm sorry, I know I'm butchering your name. And from Amsterdam. That is so, so cool. Good morning, welcome. So we have a bat house here. I'm going to flip the camera around so I can start describing it to you guys. It is a little bit smaller than some of the specs that we have on the website that I've posted here. A lot of the maternity colony houses that you might see, so the houses that people build for maternity colonies, a colony that has all of the females and babies in it, it can have up to 500 bats living in it at a time. These get really, really big, and we noticed that for our purposes they were very large. So we have a bit of a smaller bat house than that, and it's, you know, it would be a good size for a larger bachelor colony or something like that. So that would be a colony with all the males, and they usually separate out during the summer, so the females will live with females and babies, and they'll have a little nursery area. It's very sweet. And then all the boys will live in a bachelor colony. So this is, you know, an appropriate size for a small maternity colony or a normal size bachelor colony, but it is scaled down from what we would see for a normal maternity colony bat house. Good morning, Arlene. Good morning, Sean. Good morning. I am also Dutch, so that is really cool. We will go with Amsterdam or Dutch girl. We are all, my family is also Dutch. So we are, Fern, it does look like you're listening very intently to this story here. We will quickly get set up with some with our camera here to show you guys our bat house. I have all of the necessary materials here. So a bat house is usually constructed out of you know, some sort of an outdoor plywood. It can get pretty pricey the more you invest in the wood, but this is you know, 4-layered outdoor plywood, and these are all of our component parts, and I'll kind of put it together for you guys in just a second. I'm just gonna put the camera down for just a sec and get something to prop it up on, so just 1 second. Okay, we'll see if this works. Oh, you're still looking at it. There you go. Hello. Yeah, so we do recommend having like a bigger bat house for the females and their babies, because there can be way more individual bats living in that colony. So what we have here is our the base of our bat house. So this is the back. This is how they usually, this is where they would usually grip and hang on to. What's funny about bat houses is a lot of people think, you know, there's no place for them to rest or sleep or really hang out, because there are very little areas for them to go to like rest or not be hanging. But that is actually normal. These guys will hang upside down from you know, really gripping whatever they can. And so I will show you guys in a second, but I have scoured the board here so that they have a little bit of grip, but their nails are so incredibly fine and long that they can grip onto tree bark without much help at all. So they really don't need that much to grip on. They do need a little bit of something. And there are all sorts of bat house designs you'll see out there with cloth mesh stapled to the back, or wire mesh, something like that. And we have just found that there are a lot of different reasons why those two meshes might not be ideal. Though if you put like a cloth mesh on the back for them to cling to, it gets dirty and you'll have to clean it, and that is very hard to take apart the bat house and then put it back together, and it can lead to all sorts of bacterial growth and things like that. And then the wire mesh can rust and start to break down, and then can snag their little fragile, delicate wings. So the scoring of the wood is something that we have found to work pretty well. There is still a risk that they might get some splinters, but if you take a little bit of fine grit sandpaper and just go over it just a little bit. It should get rid of most of those splinters, and at least it's wood, so it's going to soften over time, and those splinters will eventually go away as well. They would already be living in trees, so they would already be exposed to this wood. So, all right, I will flip the camera back around and kind of show you guys. Good girl, Fern. Show you guys what we've constructed here. I've just put it together really quickly, but it's a very simple design, very easy to build. So this is, here, I'll stand up for you guys. This is our bat house put together. So it has a few different component pieces. It has this back piece, that long piece of plywood I showed you, and you can see that the scoring in the wood is to help them to grip. And then we have these tiny little strapping pieces that have been cut in half. And the important part about the width of the bat house is that it doesn't really exceed 1/4 of an inch, so or 1/2 an inch rather. So this might even be a little bit wide, but it's pretty good for most bat species. And what's amazing is that they are able to squeeze their little bodies into such tiny holes. We get a lot of people asking us when they're trying to exterminate bats from their attics or from their homes, you know, if closing up the hole and getting rid of the bats that currently live there will really keep them out. And unfortunately, they can get into the tiniest little places, so it's really hard to completely bat-proof your home. So they have tiny little heads, and if they can get their heads in between that little gap, then they are good. So they'll crawl their way, they'll land on this bare patch of wood down here. That's like the landing strip right there. And then they'll crawl up into the bat house, and the cover is in 2 pieces so that they have a little bit of extra ventilation in there. And then this piece up here just kind of acts as a roof. So I'll put it on and show you guys. So it just kind of acts as a roof to prevent any water from getting into the cracks up there. But it's a very simple design, really easy to make yourself. Everything here was, you know, cut on a table saw, so it's really easy if you have access to those tools to make a bat house. And then you just nail it all together in the configuration that it's in, with some, you know, 1.5 inch nails, and then you mount it on a tree with we usually use like a screw at the bottom and a hanging, you know, screw with a piece of wire at the top. But it's very easy to mount them. They're really simple, and something that you can make out of pretty basic materials. If you have a workshop or you know, junk wood lying around, you can definitely make it out of that. You just want to make sure that there's no like stain or paint or anything like that on the wood, so that there's nothing that the bats could ingest that might hurt them. But for that purpose, it's actually okay to paint the outside of the bat house, and we do recommend doing that. Bats will really enjoy being in very warm, hot places. So I know it's hard to believe, but they like to really bake in there. They can get, you know, in up to more than 100 degrees in the little tiny bat house, and they cuddle up next to each other. They really rely on each other to help conserve their body heat. So we actually recommend painting bat houses a dark color, a black or brown, and mounting them in some place that's going to get sun for at least 8 hours of the day. So that in our area means south facing, but in some areas it might not, if you're in other parts of the country. And we recommend having lots of sun exposure on that. The other thing is that you're going to want to mount it high enough up that they can feel safe going into that bat house, and you're not going to want to put it over like a door or an entryway to your home, someplace that's really high traffic, because they won't want to be in that area with you. And I can show you guys, we have one actually up here in a tree behind me, so I can show you guys what they look like kind of as the finished product. But we have a couple questions, so I want to make sure that I get to them. our Dutch fan asks how old Fern is. So we assume that she was about a year when she came into us, and she's been with us for about a year and a half, 2 years. So she's probably somewhere around 2.5, 3 years old. These guys in the wild can live to be, I don't know if you guys can see this, but she's turning her head all the way around. They can live to be somewhere between 15 and 18 years old in the wild, and then in captivity they can live much, much longer. So we'll have Fern for a long time. Byron, our male barred owl, is somewhere around 13, 14 years old. And we've had a female barred owl live with us until she was 23. I've heard of barred owls living to be 30 in captivity. So we'll have Fern for a long, long time. She's a sweet, sweet girl. She was originally brought to us after she was hit by a car and sustained some head trauma. So she actually has permanent neurological damage that makes it hard for her to survive on her own in the wild. She can still fly, she can still preen, but she is obviously not afraid of people anymore and doesn't have a lot of those wild instincts that would help her to survive in the wild. So she's going to live with us for the rest of her life. She's very sweet, and Byron is very fond of her, and she was very interested in the babies that she got to help to raise this summer. So she's definitely having a great life with us here. Thank you so much for your questions. We'll go through some of these. Do bats migrate? Chuck, so this is actually a really good question. Of the 9 species of bats that we have in Maine, about 5 of those species are migratory bats, and they are bats that typically live in trees and don't really have a lot of the colony building or congregation building behaviors that a lot of our not migratory bats have. So they tend to live in trees by themselves or with their babies, and they, for that reason, don't have as much protection during the winter to help keep them safe. They also don't enter that state of hibernation or torpor that our bats that stay here during the winter do. So we have 5 species of bats that all migrate down south for the winter. So like our red bats, our hoary bats, these sorts of bats will migrate down south. And many of them are going to the southern half of the United States, and then some are going even further down into Central America. So yes, bats do migrate, absolutely. And on their migration, they're facing a lot of the same concerns that our migratory bird species face. So, traffic, getting caught by cats, getting through urban areas, finding places to overnight. So all of those migration concerns that we think about with birds also apply to our migratory bats. That's a really good question. The bats that we build bat houses for are what we often call house bats. These guys are non-migratory bats, so they make colonies. They're colony bats. And there are a few different species of colony bats in our area, but the 2 most common ones that you would see living in your home or living in an attic or a barn are what we call little brown bats and big brown bats. And the only difference really is that one is super tiny and one is large. They aren't actually very close cousins, but they look almost identical. And the big brown bat is really the bat that you will see most frequently, and they're the ones that make the big circles in the summer sky at night that we see hunting our mosquitoes. They're the ones that usually live in more urban settings, so in mills or in our attics or barns, things like that. So they're the ones that we're going to encounter the most frequently. And little brown bats and big brown bats have actually been the most affected by a disease called white nose syndrome. It's a fungus that these guys have that has really done a number on their populations. So part of why we always recommend building bat houses, supporting our bat populations, is that they do so much good work for us, but they also really need the support. The habitat loss piece of the puzzle is something that we can do a lot to help prevent. So building a bat house and providing them with a nice home is a great way to support their populations. It's also a great way to help if you have bats in your house and you might not, want them in there, which is understandable. If you are excluding bats from your home and you would like to give them another place to live, bat houses are a great way to do that. Hi Theo, hello. Carolyn wants to know and Molly wants to know if you can put food in the bat houses. Molly, we usually don't do that, just because their food is usually living, so they do like to eat live insects, and so they might not stay in the bat house. And usually if you are putting these bat houses up, the bats are nearby and will not necessarily be eating in the bat house. They tend to eat and hunt on the wing when they're flying. So you don't necessarily need to put food in them to attract the bats, but sometimes it is hard to attract bats to bat houses if they aren't already nesting in your area. If they're not already using a colony in your area, they might not be around. They might not think that the habitat near your home or near your area is a good place for them to nest. So so these guys will sometimes use bat houses if you are, if you're excluding them from your home and you want to provide them with another place. That is sometimes someplace you can have good success with putting these guys up. Chuck, yes, owls absolutely will catch bats, and they're one of the big hunters of bats, so that's why we have Fern with us today. And we're also not really using our bats for programming at the moment. We're trying to limit our contact with them just to keep them safe and prevent them from getting sick with COVID, because it can be spread to mammals. So we have them in their own little quarantine, and there are only a couple of us that handle them, and only when we really need to feed them. And we wear the full mask, gown, gloves set up with them. We're really safe in trying to keep them protected. So we have Fern today to talk about bat houses. Thank you guys. Jennifer, yes, so one of the big reasons why we don't see as many bats as we used to is this disease that they have contracted, white nose syndrome. And unfortunately it is something that has really wiped out a lot of our bat populations, in some places completely wiped out colonies. And it is a fungal infection, so it's a fungus that grows on the face and under the skin of our bats, so that's why they call it white nose syndrome. And it really came through and spread like wildfire in our area during like the 2010s. So it's definitely gone down. It's kind of done as much harm as it could, and we are seeing bat populations stabilize, but just at a much lower level. And so that means those bats will be put through kind of a genetic bottleneck where they won't necessarily have as much genetic variation anymore, but they will go on and hopefully breed, and supporting them by helping out their habitat is one of the best ways that we can do that. So and then also just trying to make sure that we don't interfere too much with them. If we see any bats that are active during the winter, this is often a sign that they might have white nose syndrome. So if they are woken up prematurely from hibernation, they might unfortunately have this white nose syndrome, and it's something that we can help them to get through by getting them to a wildlife rehabilitator. It is very treatable. It's just a fungus, and they might contract it again once they go back out into the wild, but we can at least get them through the winter. So thank you guys so much. Have a great Father's Day. I'm now thinking we should have had Byron with us, but he probably wouldn't have done as well with all of the bat house building. But yeah, please let me know if anyone has any other questions about the work that we do about bat houses. I'm happy to answer questions about bat houses. I'm not sure what the angry face is for. If anyone has any questions I haven't gotten to, please leave them down below. What are you looking at? You see somebody? Oh, there's a turkey vulture up in the sky flying around that Miss Fern is seeing. Hello. Hi. It's just a turkey vulture. Yeah. Oh, no problem, Melissa. That's totally fine. Yeah, the kids love to button mash. That's no problem. I figured it was something like that when I kept seeing them. I was like, usually they don't do it over and over again. She is so beautiful. I love how she's keeping her eyes on this turkey vulture. It's just a turkey vulture. He's not going to hurt you. Yeah. Kara has a question. So we try to keep our raptor species at least in mated pairs if we can. So in the wild, they would they would normally live with a member of their species. They for most of the year, the part of the years where they would be courting and mating and having their young and raising them can last about, you know, about 9 months. So they live with their mates for a good portion of the year, and we try to keep them in pairs when we can. So we have a pair of barred owls and a pair of great horned owls that both live together. So when we get a Chuck, I think it was just a button mashing 3-year-old. That's so funny. Hi, Michelle. Hello. That's totally fine, Melissa. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that your son is enjoying everything. So we try to keep them in mated pairs when we can. They won't breed necessarily in captivity, but it is really great for their brains to keep them stimulated, to make sure that they are having a good quality of life. So when we can, we try to do that. It usually depends on whether or not they are, you know, from the wild originally or imprinted on people. For example, our little screech owl Lucy, who has been with people her entire life and it lives with us because she is imprinted, will probably not get a mate in captivity because she wouldn't necessarily recognize that owl as an owl, as a member of her species. We had something similar happen with our female peregrine falcon, Freya. She was with us for 14 years, and when we admitted Perry, our little peregrine, we were hoping that he might be able to be a mate for Freya, but then we tried to introduce them to each other and it did not go well, and they lived separately because she did not recognize him as a member of her species, so she really thought she was kind of a human falcon hybrid and didn't know what Perry was. So we do try to keep them in pairs if they're both from the wild, if they both get along. We do monitor them for a lot of time when we first introduce them to make sure they're okay. In the case of Byron and Fern and Galileo and Gaia, they were both right off the bat happy with each other. I've heard a story, I wasn't here at the time, but Gaia, when we first put her into her enclosure with Galileo, she was probably around 6 months old maybe, and he immediately started preening her and, you know, cuddling her and taking care of her. He was really great. So you know, they get along famously well when they're members of their own species. And the fostering birds especially, it's amazing how quickly they adopt another baby into their habitat. So bats active during the day. Bats might sometimes be active during the day, Chuck, especially if it's you know, summertime and there's a lot of insect activity, but it is something to keep your eye out for if they're acting aggressive or showing any other symptoms of illness. It could definitely be something that you would want to contact a rehabilitator or your animal control officer about. If you see them out during the day in the winter time, it is definitely something to contact a rehabilitator about, because they should not be out and about in the winter. Although sometimes if it warms up in like February for a day and it's like over 50, they might come out. But usually during the winter they are pretty much in their colonies hibernating and shouldn't necessarily be coming out. Hi. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. We will let you guys get back to your Father's Day. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. Thank you so much for donating and for watching with us. We really appreciate it. And we hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. And we will see you tomorrow. Thank you guys. Bye.